Hey there guys and gals, it's restocker here coming at you with another Dota 2 video. I hope you guys are all having a wonderful day. And for you guys today, I have another patch analysis video here. So patch 7.12, a quick preface, I haven't playtested this patch at all. So a lot of the things that I say will be relatively raw. Take the things that I say with a grain of salt. You guys get the idea. And before I get into the patch analysis, I'd like to quickly apologize because I will be muting my mic on occasion because I have a bit of a sniffle right now, so I'll be blowing my nose from time to time, so sorry about that. So patch 7.12, it looks like they've enabled Pangolier in Captain's mode. And much like the last patch where there was Dark Willow, I won't be talking about Pangolier until I get to the section with all the heroes starting with P. And hopefully we see Pangolier there. And even if he's not, I'll be giving my thoughts on the hero then. So neutral creeps, the stack bounty increased from 15% to 20%. I think this is really nice for support heroes. I think eventually we want to see this number getting to around 25%. Because it's going to speed up, or I'm going to say, how should I say this? It's going to allow Dota games to end a little bit more quickly the more farm supports are. So right now, I think the average competitive Dota match is somewhere between like 35 to 37 minutes. And I think if we can bring that down to the low 30s, it would be a bit more enjoyable, because right now the state of Dota I think is really nice for the early and mid game. It's just that the late game sometimes gets delayed a little bit longer than it has to, just because of the nature of certain heroes. For example, like Tinker and Keeper of the Light, they're just very good at stalling. But if you have support heroes that are able to pick up maybe like a Pipe, Glimmer Cape, Force Staff, these items, and you have more of those items on your supports, you'll be able to utilize more tools to help you finish out a game, where at the same time you're not going to be constantly stacking in the early game and finishing stacks early, where it doesn't impact the early and mid game. So maybe bumping up the number to this a little bit more will help close out the games. Again, a step in the right direction in my opinion with the slight buff here. So up next we have the items. Clarity, mana regeneration reduced from 3.2 to 3. So right now the thing with Clarity is it's an extremely powerful item on heroes that have wave clear, and at the same time it's very powerful on roaming heroes. So when you think about wave clear, maybe a hero like Pugna, you think about Lina, Leschrac, Shadow Fiend, all these heroes are extremely powerful at just pushing out waves, and then they pop Clarities and they go in their jungle and they start farming even more. And then you think about roaming heroes, think about Tusk, Bounty Hunter, probably two of the most notorious roaming heroes in the moment. And when you think about them, it's just that they're able to continuously hound a lane because of how powerful the Clarity is. Now, the issue with Clarity is you don't want to nerf it too much, because then you take a lot away from support heroes. It becomes very difficult for support heroes to zone offlaners who are also very powerful at the moment. So rather than nerfing everything collectively, like nerfing the offlaners, nerfing the roaming heroes, nerfing farm potential, I think it's a little bit better to nerf Clarities just slightly. Maybe make it like go to 2.5 or 2.7 regen, and then increase the regeneration rate on certain items. Excuse me. So maybe increase the regeneration rate on like the Sobi mask or Sage's mask. And with I think having a slightly more items that are focused on regeneration, you allow support heroes to pick up these small key items, whereas maybe a core hero wouldn't like to pick up those small regeneration items because it slows some of their item progressions down. So that's what I'm kind of thinking about when it comes to mana regeneration. The slight nerf is definitely welcome, though. I think the item is a bit too powerful at the moment. So Heart of Tarask strength increased from 40 to 45. Again, Heart is already a very powerful item, I think, but this buff makes it so that you're able to just, again, pick up a Heart, and hopefully it helps you close games out a little bit more quickly, because we do see these heroes that are extremely powerful in the late game, but again, it's a bit more difficult for them to close out matches, and there's a slight buff to Heart here. So Moonshard attack speed increased from 120 to 130. I believe this is only applied to the uneaten Moonshard, so a slight buff to the item there. Next we have Nullifier projectile speed decreased from 1,200 to 900. The issue with Nullifier is it's very good on these heroes that go Orchid Nullifier as a 1-2 combo, and I think probably Queen of Pain is probably the biggest proponent of that. Maybe like offlane Nature's Prophet goes Orchid into Nullifier, and when you have that combination, it becomes very difficult to play against. The item is also sometimes relatively picked up early on certain heroes. Occasionally on like a Phantom Lancer, Gyrocopter, they'll pick it up as like a third, fourth item and make it very difficult for enemies to play up against them. So I think the item, it's a decent nerf to the item, not nerfing the cooldown, and is a good way to go. Projectile speed allows you to have some kind of counterplay to the item. So Refresher Orb, mana regeneration increased from 3 to 5, a slight buff to the item there. We don't really see Refresher Orb being picked up all too much. So I think this is just a quality of life change, I guess, a little bit more than anything, just makes it a bit nicer to hold on to the item. Satanic duration increased from 4.5 to 5. Again, just a slight buff to the item, makes it so that carries can stand in the fight for a little bit longer. But nothing too noteworthy there. Silver Edge break duration decreased from 5 to 4. Silver Edge cooldown reduced from 24 to 22. So I think this is a good change because it means that Silver Edge isn't going to be as prevalent in team fights. I don't think the item should be prevalent in team fights. So for example, if there's a big team fight happening and you break a Tide, maybe a Bristleback or a Spectre or something like that, or Timbersaw, you have 4 seconds to burst that hero down as a team. Now, in a team fight, that hero is probably going to have supports from their allies to help them survive and things like that. So the item, the break ability becomes much weaker in team fight, whereas now you have reduced cooldown on the item, and it becomes a little bit more better as a ganking tool, essentially. Did I just say more better? That's just better. It's better as a ganking tool. So you can use it on heroes like Tiny, maybe play very aggressive Faceless Void or something like that, and you can go for a lot of pickoffs with the item and play constantly being very aggressive rather than relying on rather than relying so much on the break. You use it a little bit more as a ganking tool. Again, I think that's very nice for the item and will speed up gameplay a little bit. So we have Skull Basher, bash duration increased from 1.45 to 1.5, and then Abyssal Blade gets the exact same buff. The issue with Abyssal Blade right now, I think, is that the heroes that used to pick up the item are no longer very popular. I think two of the largest or the biggest proprietors of the Abyssal Blade pickup were Anti-Mage and Slark, and both those heroes are relatively weak at the moment. Slark is almost never picked. Anti-Mage is picked every now and then, but even when he's picked, typically the game is somewhat decided before that. The Abyssal Blade doesn't make a great difference. He's probably going to get it as like his last item. I think one of the main issues with Abyssal Blade is that Vanguard is one of the components that goes into the item, and Vanguard is pretty meh at the moment. There are a lot of other substitutes. Typically you'll just work towards something like a Sanjin Yasha if you want to get a little bit more tanky. Drums is a very good substitute. Even Aquila gives you like armor and all these other wonderful stats like regen and stuff. So Vanguard is more or less left in the dust in most cases, which is why I don't think we see the Abyssal Blade being picked up all too much. So maybe changing that the Vanguard into something else will make the item a little bit more popular. So Spirit Vessel enemy current health base damage changed from 3% direct HP modification to 4.5% magical. So this is just for the most part, it's going to be a nerf. Of course, if you have like insane magic amplification, then the item will be a little bit better. But for most cases, this is a nerf to the item. Again, Spirit Vessel is very, very powerful with the whole not being able to heal effectively through its usage. It's probably one of the most powerful items in competitive play and when you're working in a team environment. So much needed nerf there. So up next we have the heroes, and I'll be doing the same thing that I did last time. I'll be talking about the heroes and what makes the heroes powerful or what makes them weak with their current state in the meta. So up next we have Anti-Mage Mana Void damage increased from 0.6, 0.85, 1.1 to 0.8, 0.95, 1.1. So the issue with Anti-Mage is, first of all, I don't think this change helps him all too much. It will allow him to potentially teleport to mid lane and gank certain heroes that have a lot of mana in the early game. So heroes like Storm Spirit, Leschrac, even Queen of Pain, just to name a few, these heroes tend to have relatively high mana pools in the early game. So if they go for something like an early Arcane boot, Queen of Pain likes to get things like Null Talisman and stays on Intreads typically. When they have these kinds of things, Mana Void becomes a little bit more powerful. So you can potentially teleport mid, gank their mid laner, farm the mid lane a little bit, and then farm the neutrals and slowly work towards your your safe lane again. The issue with anti-mage though is when you go for these teleport plays, typically when you teleport a hero like Gyrocopter, Phantom Lancer, Lifesteal or something like that to make this kind of play, then you transition for a tower push. Whereas anti-mage, after you go for, like, let's say you're level 7, level 8, and you go for this kind of play where you teleport, you gank a lane with your mana void, you probably want to go back to farming. You don't really want to go for like a tower push because the hero is still relatively susceptible to death. Now, again, that's on a case-by-case basis. You have to figure out whether that gank will allow you to get a tower. Do you have a hero that's very good at pushing on your team in the very earlier stages at least? So again, giving him a little bit more opportunity. The main issue with anti-mage is that he suffers greatly against anyone that pressures him in lane. He doesn't really have any innate tools that allow him to stand up against dual lanes and offensive tri-lanes and things like that. He has been being picked up in certain niche situations in competitive matches, and he has been doing relatively okay from what I can tell. But again, I think one of the other weird changes that he had was that they actually swapped around one of his talents. So let's check up Anti-Mage very quickly in the last patch. And what they did was they made it so that his blink cooldown is at level 20, where it used to be at level 15. So they swapped the cooldown and the cast range talents, and essentially you have to wait a little bit longer to get that cooldown, which is weird because you would probably have a Battle Fury before level 15 in almost every game of Anti-Mage that you play. And when you take away the blink cooldown, you're essentially slowing down the farm rate of Anti-Mage because he relies on farming lane creeps and he blinks around the neutral camps. So you're effectively taking away a GPM talent from the hero. So that was kind of a weird change for me. But yeah. Anti-Mage, I think, still relatively weak. So I'm not an Arc Warden player, but I'll give you guys my thoughts anyway. Arc Warden Flux cooldown reduced from 18 to 16. Arc Warden Magnetic Field AoE increased from 275 to 300. So the thing with Arc Warden is he's a relatively... I think he's... when I see very good Arc Warden players, when I spectate their games, on occasion we see him in competitive matches. It's hard to run at Arc Warden because of his toolkit. First of all, he's got the Magnetic Field, which makes it very difficult to play aggressively against him. He has Flux, which forces opponents to stay together, and Spark Wraith just does so much damage, and it zones out certain areas. So, for example, you put Spark Wraiths down, and then your support pulls neutrals. It's very difficult for the offlaner to come in and contest those neutral pulls because of Spark Wraith. So the hero has a lot of utility, but at the same time, if he does die, he has like what I call the Queen of Pain syndrome. I don't think there's any other hero in Dota that exemplifies this more than Queen of Pain. If Queen of Pain dies early, she has a horrible game. It's extremely difficult to come back from with Queen of Pain. I think SF is similar, but SF has certain tools that just kind of allow him to farm at an insane rate, right? But both Queen of Pain and SF, they don't want to have a bad start to the game, and Arc Warden is no exception to that rule. It's very difficult for this hero to claw his way back into the game, even with like the double Midas, which will eventually get running. He's a hero that typically has to stay like an item above the enemy core and create a lot of pressure on the map, and his timings are the key thing with Arc Warden. So I think the issue with the hero is that not that he's necessarily weak, but he's very high risk. And if you're not extremely proficient with the hero, and your team, more importantly, doesn't know how to play around the hero, it becomes very difficult. And he is a hero that's very hard to play around. Yeah, before I jump to the next hero, let's talk a little bit more about him. He's a hard hero to play around because you have to conceptualize that he's a hero that takes up a lot of farm on the map. So naturally, you have to go for offlaners and mid heroes that are not as greedy because of just how much this hero's farms. So that's another thing that's very important to consider. Just in general, when you're playing Dota, you know, is my hero that I'm picking, if you're like on last pick core, is it a nice fit for my team? Because if you have a greedy offlaner and a greedy mid, so for example, Tiny is a hero that needs a decent amount of farm. So if your offlaner is Tiny and then your mid hero is, I don't know, who's like a greedy mid hero, like SF, and then you're picking Arc Warden, you're going to have 3 greedy cores. There's probably not going to be enough farm around the map. So just think of that kind of stuff. And I think that's one of the main weaknesses with the hero. So Axe Battle Hunger duration increased from 10 to 12. The issue with Axe is he's a great hero when you have items, but it's hard to get those items on Axe because of how easy it is to zone him. At the same time, Axe doesn't apply too much pressure to most safe laners. Like I think the prominent ones in the current meta, even a melee hero like Lifestealer, we have Razor, who's very popular. Terror Blade has extremely high armor. I mean, Counter Helix does do pure damage, but he's able to like trade the right clicks relatively easily. When he gets Metamorphosis, it's pretty nice, and he can just kind of handle himself relatively well. So the popular heroes do relatively okay against Axe, and at the same time, it's very easy to zone him, and Axe doesn't apply a lot of pressure. So when you're going to play Axe, what you should typically do is just make sure you secure EXP. Even if you die like 2 times, but you're level 5 around minute 6, minute 7, that's okay, because then you can start transitioning into the jungle a little bit more with 3 points in a counter helix, and you can start farming for your items there. So we have a Bounty Hunter, Shuriken Toss mana cost increase from 120, progressively getting up to 150 to 150 at all levels. And I think that's a good change to the hero, because typically what happens is Bounty Hunter is one of those heroes that really abuses clarities. He's always running around the map with relatively high mana. Sometimes you pick up a mango on him just so that you have that surge of mana to cast Shuriken Toss. And I think that's probably what we're going to be seeing a little bit more, is that we're going to see bounties with mangoes. And mango is a fantastic item on bounty to begin with, because it actually offers him a little bit of HP regen, which is really nice because he's typically out of combat. So if he doesn't die, he's going to be slowly regenning, running around the map, and just being able to sustain himself. So probably see like more clarity, Orb of Venom, mango starts with Bounty Hunter, and something along those lines. Maybe the position 5 hero pulls him like 1 or 2 tangos. But yeah, nice nerf to the hero overall. I think he's a little bit too powerful at the moment. So up next we have Bloodseeker, and my favorite hero. Thirst Linger bonus duration increase from 2 to 4. So this is insane. First of all, the ability is essentially being increased by 100%. So its uptime is doubled. And the thing with Bloodseeker is I'm doing air quotes right now, he's essentially a reset hero. So reset in air quotes, because when you get 1 kill, you want to chain it to another kill. And by having the Thirst Linger for even longer, it means that he's going to do exceptionally well in team fights. At the same time, it's going to make it so that he can play very aggressively and potentially get out after he kills an opponent. So in most cases, you'll be diving opponents, playing very aggressively. Maybe you're in their jungle or something. It's going to become very difficult to react to the plays that Bloodseeker does now. So this is going to make him a very good hero in team fights. And at the same time, it's going to be very good for him during the laning stages when you play aggressively and you go for those jungle dives or those tower dives where you're deep in enemy territory. So a really nice change. But the issue with Bloodseeker is that in competitive play, the thing with Bloodseeker is, first of all, he needs a good start. Okay, let's talk about that first. He's a hero that needs relatively uncontested farm for the first 3 or 4 levels, where you can get like a magic wand up and running and you get like a boots or something. So if you can sustain yourself until you get some of those small key items, then he'll be relatively fine. Bloodseeker loves 1v1s. Like, he absolutely does not care about, he does fairly well against almost any hero in a 1v1 matchup. And again, he lasts extremely well under tower and things like that, so he doesn't care too much about being pushed into his tower. The issue with the hero is he struggles when there's like a very powerful enemy dual lane, and against enemy like tri-lanes, when there's some kind of roaming potential in the early game, he doesn't do all too well. So that's his main problem, but I think he functions extremely well during the mid game. And then his issue is that in the late game, he's a decent tower hitter. He's not terrible, but he's not a safe tower hitter. That's the issue. So the thing with like Juggernaut, for example, and Phantom Lancer is that they have these items, like Juggernaut has Healing Ward, he has Blade Fury, Phantom Lancer has Doppelganger, and typically Phantom Lancer just builds very tanky items that make him very durable, whereas Bloodseeker builds more offensive-oriented items, and he doesn't have those innate things in his skill kit that allow him to hit towers safely. So typically when you pick Bloodseeker, you need another core hero that's going to be good at hitting towers or creates some kind of pressure so that Bloodseeker can run around in team fights and be a nuisance. So that's how to approach the game with Bloodseeker as a carry. I have run offlane Bloodseeker from time to time, and it's relatively okay. He does okay. He makes it so that the supports actually have to stick with their carry for a decent amount of time. And he starts trading very efficiently with the enemy carry if the supports leave. So he's kind of like a magnet that keeps the enemy supports in the lane, or the enemy carry starts to suffer a little bit. And again, Bloodseeker last hits extremely well. So even if you're like a level or 2 behind the enemy carry, even if you get pushed into the tower, again, you're going to have a pretty decent time of it. So all in all, Bloodseeker still relatively weak and competitive, I think. This buff might make him a little bit better in AoE oriented lineups, but as a carry, he's okay. So yeah, I'm gonna blow my nose very quickly, guys, so I apologize. So up next, we have Chen. Holy Persuasion can no longer target non-player allied creeps. So I think this is how it should have been from the start. Like as soon as this happened, this this nerf should have probably occurred to Chen, because he's kind of using a little bit of a gimmick, right? You're not the I think essentially heroes have like a certain identity, and when you find something cool like this, it's nice, but it shouldn't be changing the game in a way that's a little bit unintended. You know, finding something that's unintended, but it's like cool. For example, like the fountain hook with Pudge Chen was pretty cool, right? But then you realize that it's a little bit too broken or too powerful, and you patch it out of the game. And I think having Chen being able to mess with creep with a creep wave like this, especially considering that no neutral spawn early in the game, there's really not much else for him to do. It kind of just outright, I shouldn't say win a lane, but it creates a massive advantage for the lane if he's able to send a creep back. So he should rely a little bit more on controlling like the enemy jungle, focusing on creep control and pressuring with those tools rather than relying on this. So that's a nice nerf to the hero. Now, one thing that I just realize is that when Lifestealer jumps into one of your allied creeps, you can no longer send Lifestealer back to your base, you know, before you test a faith the creep, and then Lifestealer would go back. So that's actually something that I just thought about. So that's kind of I guess unintended nerf there. So Klink's strafe duration increased from 3 to 3.5 seconds. Again, I think Klink's is one of those heroes that's not being played enough. I don't think he's a great hero by any stretch of the imagination, but he's definitely playable and I think good in a lot of situations. I shouldn't say a lot, in niche situations. First of all, Klink's is a hero that's very good at 1v1 matchups. I think, I forget who, but there was a streamer that I was watching who said Klink's is not good at harassing enemy offlaners, where I think it's quite the contrary. I think Klink's is fantastic at harassing enemy offlaners. And he does very well. Again, the issue with Klink's is that when multiple heroes start coming into his lane, that's when he doesn't start to, that's when he kind of starts to falter and he doesn't function as well. So let's talk about some more of the benefits to picking Klink's. Klink's is a hero that, again, zones off laners in a 1v1 situation, or like if he has another support with him, he can potentially even get a kill as early as like level 2. He does very well in that aspect. He's very good at creating early pressure. He's a hero that when he hits level 6, level 7, and he gets his ultimate, he can start running around the map and just creating a lot of pressure. At the same time, he can take towers early on, and he takes towers very quickly, and he forces enemy rotations. And the thing is, he's able to move around the map so quickly that when an enemy teleports to one of the lanes that he's pressuring, he can just immediately move on to another lane. Now, the other thing with Klink's is he can take Roshan relatively easily, maybe not as fast as a hero like Ursa. And the thing is, I consider Klink's, Ursa, and Monkey King to kind of all be in the same category of heroes. I think they like to farm a little bit, get 1 or 2 key items, and then they start running around the map and just creating a whole bunch of havoc and pressure. Now, the thing with Ursa is he takes Roshan very early, gets a lot of gold for his team. Klink's has the potential to do that. Not solo, of course. He's going to need like another hero to tank up for him. But if he has a Desolator or a Solar Crest or something very early into the game, he can definitely take Roshan very quickly if he has one other hero just tanking it for him. And then I think the main issue with Klink's is that if you don't get all the outer towers within like 20 minutes, so you get all the tier 1s, tier 2s, and like a Roshan in 20 minutes, the hero starts to become very weak because he's not a great team fight hero, but he does okay in team fights as long as he's not the one who's being targeted. So you have to be very weary of your positioning, and I think that's the main flaw with Klink's, is that you want a lot of these aggressive items. You don't want to go for things like Lincoln Spheres and BKBs, but if you don't go for those items, you just kind of die. So hard to run, but I think is viable in certain matchups. So definitely should get picked up a little bit more. So now we're on to Crystal Maiden. Base damage increased by 3. So I think she used to have a base damage of like 37 or something very low. So now a little bit higher, still kind of poopy, but a little bit higher. Crystal Maiden Arcane Aura Self Mana Region increased from 1.2, 1, 2, 3, 4 to 1.3, 2.2, 3.1, and 4. So got a little bit of a buff there for the early game. I don't think this is going to affect Crystal Maiden all too much. Still, her main issue is that clarities are too powerful and that she's too slow. And on top of that, her base damage is very bad. So if you want to zone an enemy offlaner with Crystal Maiden, you're going to have to rely on your spell usage. So having the aura being increased a little bit is nice. But she's too slow. So when the enemy offlaner starts running towards you as Crystal Maiden, if you don't have Frostbite up, you're probably either going to die or take a significant amount of damage. So what Crystal Maiden has to rely on typically is stacking and pulling camps. That's how she tries. That's her like pseudo way of zoning offlaners. So she's still a little bit weak. I think she needs a slight movement speed increase. Her spells are very powerful, so you don't want to over buff her movement speed. But with the latest nerf to Boots of Speed, also I shouldn't say nerf, rework to Boots of Speed, costing more gold. Sure, it gives you more movement speed, but supports don't really have the gold to get boots early in the game. So she's going to be slower for even longer. So Darkseer Vacuum AoE increased from 250 progressively to 550, and then it seems like the early Vacuum AoE has been increased, which is nice. Darkseer Vacuum cooldown rescaled from 32 to 60, 50, 40, 30. Okay. Darkseer Vacuum cast range rescaled from 500 to 450, going all the way to 600, so higher at max level. Darkseer Vacuum pull duration increased from 0.5 to 0.3, so it happens faster, and then it takes a little bit longer at the higher levels. Darkseer Vacuum damage rescaled from 40, 80, 120, 160 to 25, 50, 100, 200. Darkseer Wall of Replica incoming damage reduced from 400% to 300%. Wall of Replica width increased from 1000 to 1000. Okay, so I just want to read all of the changes, and now I'll be talking about Darkseer. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about the identity of the hero. The thing with Darkseer is he has like fallen off like the face of the earth. Like, where is this guy? We don't see him being picked anywhere, and this is one of those heroes that was extremely popular a couple patches ago. So one of the main issues, I think, is that Darkseer doesn't come online fast enough. Sure, he creates a little bit of pressure for the enemy offlaner. He's able to farm up relatively well and can maintain the farm and EXP. That's not the issue with the hero. It's that the amount of utility that Darkseer brings is very team-oriented, whereas I think more some other heroes... how do I phrase this? When you have heroes like Tiny, when you have heroes like Tidehunter and Omni Knight, these heroes do have a team fight component, especially Omni Knight and Tide, but they're also able to just shut down the enemy carry as well. That's a very important thing to add. Darkseer trades farm. He doesn't necessarily shut down the enemy carry, whereas a hero like Omni Knight can very realistically make it so that the enemy safe laner is under pressure. Omni Knight and Tidehunter very specifically make it so that the enemy supports have to stick to that carry for a decent amount of time, whereas Darkseer doesn't apply the pressure in the same sense as those other heroes that I mentioned. So when it comes to Darkseer, you end up trading farm. It means that the enemy supports are able to just walk around the map and create a lot of havoc. So I think that's one of the main issues with the hero. So when it comes to changes like this, when you increase the AoE of Vacuum early on and all that stuff, it means that they're trying to make Darkseer a little bit more threatening in the early game, which is weird because they increased the cooldown on Vacuum to a minute at level 1. And considering you don't level Vacuum very high, now it probably means you have to invest a lot more points into it. So you're probably going to go for like Ion Shell level 1. You might get Vacuum level 2 if you can have like a dual lane situation with Darkseer. I think he's a little bit better as a dual laner now. The thing with Darkseer is he's also level start, so it's going to be kind of weird where if you dual lane and you don't get kills and you're not securing yourself a lot of farm, then it's going to be very lackluster. But from what I can tell, this means that Vacuum's going to be a little bit more of a powerful tool in terms of damage. His ultimate is also still like really bad. You have Terrorblade with Reflection on a 5-second cooldown in the late game, and Wall of Replica just seems kind of bad at the moment. So I don't think we're going to see Darkseer being picked all too much. I'm not a particular, I don't particularly play Darkseer all too much, so I can't really give you guys my opinion on the hero in terms of how it feels to play. But I've played up against him a couple times, and mostly you just trade farm. I just told my support, it's okay for you to leave the lane. We're not really going to kill the Darkseer more often than not. So we'll just end up trading farm. And then my supports, you know, they're running around, being able to create pressure in the other lane. So Dark Willow Terrorize, cast time increased from 0.8 to 1 second. So that's nice. I think Terrorize was too good as a tool for both disengaging your opponents and at the same time zoning out opponents. So now you're going to have to kind of be a bit more, you're going to have some kind of clairvoyance, I guess, in a sense, to understand where your opponents are going to be when you throw that out. So Dark Willow has another change here. Bedlam cooldown increased from 40, 30, 20 to 40, 35 to 30. So it's getting nerfed at the higher levels. So just against light nerfs, I think this is okay. I think she needs a little bit more tweak in terms of the damage, more so than her cooldowns and the cast rate. Like the cast time is definitely a nice change, but the cooldown on her abilities is also, it's, you know, a nice change. I think the numbers are where the problem really lies. She does way too much damage as a support, I think. The problem is not so much the damage, it's like the damage along with the utility. She has utility and damage, and when you have both of those as a support, things get a little weird. So Dazzle Poison Touch damage increased from 10, 20, 30, 40 to 10, 24, 38, 52. Again, Dazzle, I think he's not... Here's the thing with Dazzle. If you can get... Like, if the match is even and Dazzle can... You know, he's like level 12, level 13 around the 25, 30 minute mark or something like that, and he's got a sufficient amount of points into his skills, then he's a good hero. The issue with Dazzle is for the first 5, 6, 7 minutes of the game, he's not very good. In this hyper-aggressive meta right now, he doesn't offer enough protection. When you think of Dazzle, you think of a hero that's able to keep his allies alive, right? But when you don't have enough points into Shallow Grave, where you can cast it from a far distance, and then the cooldown goes down, when you don't have enough points into your heal, the hero's not as good. Dazzle's a hero who's not one of those heroes that has a value point in most abilities. He needs to have a lot of points in his abilities for them to function well. So that's the main issue with Dazzle, I think, right now, is that he's not good due to the fact that he needs to have sufficient levels, and in this, again, this hyper-aggressive meta, he doesn't function too well. So having a little bit of increased damage is a nice change, but he's going to need a couple other changes to some of his abilities. Death Prophet, Spirit Siphon Charge Restore Time increased from 45 to 60, 55, 50, 45. And the Silence Mana cost increased from 80 to 80, going progressively 10 higher at each level, ending at 110. So Death Prophet is probably one of the most, how would I phrase it? She's a very stable mid laner. She doesn't really ever lose the mid lane, and in most cases she'll like win. So she either goes even or she wins, and then she's able to kind of just run around the map and create so much pressure with Exorcism and how powerful it is. One of the main issues with Death Prophet is that she does so much damage while not going for any damage items. Right, so you'll go like Phase, Yules, and then you can work towards like I've seen, you know, we've seen like Aeon Disc, we've seen BKB like second item after like Yules or something. Some game, like, we haven't really seen the Veil of Discord, but you can go for like Veil, Drums. Like, she doesn't go for too many damage oriented items, yet her kit with Soul Siphon, you know, very low cooldowns, Crypt Swarm, and Exorcism just gives her so much utility and damage at the same time. That's what makes the hero very powerful, I think. So yeah, Death Prophet just going to be very powerful. I think these changes are going to make it a little bit more annoying to play the hero, but she's still going to be very powerful. Disruptor Static Storm no longer lingers on your hero for 0.5 seconds after walking away from the AoE. It already ends immediately once the spell's over. So Disruptor Kinetic Field cooldown increased from 13, 12, 11, 10 to 19, 16, 13, 10. So I think this is a pretty... so the linger was just a little bit of an annoying thing because I think it was provided by like an aura or something. So that was a little bit annoying to play against. I think this is a pretty nice nerf to the hero because Kinetic Field was a skill that was very good as a value point. You could leave it at level 1 or even like get 2 points into it and then start maxing out Thunderstrike again. But now you're a little bit more invested into maxing out Kinetic Field if you want to have that very low cooldown. And you can see now you need to get all the way to level 3 Kinetic Field just to have the old level 1 cooldown. So I think we will probably be seeing, you'll still probably get Static Storm level 1 and then go like Glimpse, and then you'll probably get 2 points into Kinetic Field and then get your ultimate. And then from that point on, you might have to decide whether you want to max out. You're probably still going to max out Glimpse And then you have to really question whether you want the extra cooldown on kinetic field, reduction I should say, or if you want to focus a little bit more on damage. So having that thought process go through your head is definitely a good thing, rather than having like a blind, just a no-brain skill order. Drow Ranger Precision Aura attack damage bonus increased from 10, 18, 26, 34 to 10, 20, 30, 40. So the thing with Drow is I think she's pretty weak. She has a lot of issues with the hyper-aggressive meta. That's what I'm calling it now, just hyper-aggressive. When heroes run at Drow, she does not function well. And at the same time, she's good at getting towers and stuff, but with just how easy it is to catch a hero that's pushing a tower. So for example, Drow is pushing a tower, then a Tusk rolls onto you, there's a bounty hunter on you. There are a lot of heroes that like to fight early on. You can have like Lifestealer jump into one of his allies. You can have Phantom Lancer catch up to you and just slow you down enough for one of your teammates to get to you. Like a lot of these, it's not even so much that the position 4 and position 3 heroes have a lot of utility. It's that the carry heroes now get involved very early on as well. And I don't think Drow Ranger wants to get involved in team fights early on. And then she doesn't, like the thing with anti-mages, he's picked in niche scenarios, but he has tools that allow him to get out of a predicament. He has the blink, he has spell shield, these things that make him a little bit more durable or survivable at the very least than a hero like Drow Ranger. So she's still a little weak, I think. Maybe increasing her strength gain a little bit or giving her a bit more armor in the early game might help her out. Elder Titan Echo Stomp initial stun duration reduced from 0.8 to 0.2. So yeah, that's just going to make it so that you can't just like stomp someone and hit them for one free hit. I think that's, or can you still do that? What's initial stun duration? I'm not too sure what that change means, so let's try to figure out what that is. So Elder. So we got the channel time, initial stun duration. So obviously this hasn't been changed yet. Because you still have the sleep duration and you still have the wake up threshold, right? Affected units cannot be woken up. Okay, so that is what they were talking about. So that wake up duration only occurs, it used to happen for the 0.8 seconds, now it happens within 0.2. So if you stomp, you have to hit right away, or you need to, like an ally or something to coordinate with you a little bit better there. So now it's less about like giving the leeway for that, like a legitimate extra hit and waking up your opponent. And it's a little bit more of like in case you accidentally hit someone and you wake them up immediately. So more of it's gotten nerfed to more of a quality of life thing rather than being very powerful. So that's nice. So Ember Spirit base armor increased by 1. I think this is a little bit of a meme, but also very important, because ever since Poor Man's Shield was removed from the game, it became very hard to lane Ember Spirit in the mid lane because he would just get right-clicked to death. So giving him a little bit of armor is nice. He still needs probably a bit more armor, and with the current state of the game, I think he's okay, but he's a bit underplayed. There are situations where I think Ember Spirit can be very powerful, because the hero doesn't mind taking part in fights early on, and he's very good at that. Where he struggles is he's not good at consistently farming the jungle. Like, he can take a stack with his Flame Guard, but moving from one camp to another, he's not particularly great. He's not good at taking towers or Roshan, so that's where he falls short. Enchantress Untouchable Slow rescaled from 40, 70, 100, 130 to 20, 60, 100, 140. So better at the highest level. Enchant cooldown rescaled from 30, 24, 18, 12 to 55, 40, 25, 10. Enchantress slow increased from Enchantress's enchant slow increased from 2.25 to 6 at max level to 3, 4, 5, 6. Enchantress enchant dominate duration rescaled from 80 to 50, and then it goes up to 80. Enchantress impetus mana cost rescaled from 55, 65. So okay, they've tweaked around Enchantress a little bit more. She doesn't have too many value points now. Again, I talked about Dazzle earlier, saying Dazzle's a hero that doesn't have value points, and I think Enchantress just got that treatment right now. Yeah, the slow is a little bit better at level 1, but the cooldown is so much longer now that you might have to invest a couple points into it so that you can actually catch opponents. At the same time, Untouchable, this is an ability that you would level up anyway, so just nerfing it at the first few levels means that you're not going to be as much of a nuisance when you're playing offlane Enchantress. But this is still an ability you're going to max. It's just that it's not as good. Like getting this at level 1 might not be as good in the offlane. Maybe now you get Nature's Attendance and then you go back and get 2 points of Untouchable. And then impetus mana cost means that you're able to fight a little bit more. So Enchantress has lost a lot of her utility. I would say annoyance factor. She's not as annoying, but now she's a little bit better at contributing to team fights. At the same time, she's not going to be able to utilize creeps to harass you for as longer, and you're going to have to invest a little bit more points in enchant as well. So enchant getting nerfed pretty heavily here, I'd say. And you're going to probably have to invest a little bit more points into it early on to make it function a bit better. Gyrocopter flat cannon cooldown increased from 30 to 40. Homing missile hits to destroy reduced from 3344 to 3 at all levels. So Gyrocopter is still extremely powerful. I think flat cannon, again, this nerf hit him right exactly where he had to be hit. I don't think that like a rocket barrage or homing missile is like those spells are very powerful, but the thing that was making Gyrocopter very powerful was that he was utilizing flat cannon to just farm up a storm essentially. So you'd flat cannon, you'd farm up like 2-3 neutral camps at the same time, you'd go back into your lane, you'd deal with the creep wave, and then 30 seconds are up, you go back into the jungle, repeat the process, and he was just being able to do that too much. Now there's a bit more of a downtime for you to do that. And at the same time, certain fights in Dota occur over a long period of time, and this makes it so that whenever flak's out, you either have to win the fight using that flak, whereas before you would have 10 less seconds to wait where you could re-engage your opponent. So definitely a much needed nerf to Gyrocopter. So next up we have IO. Tether now sets your movement speed to match the tethered target speed. I'm assuming this is just for Tether now sets your movement speed to match the target speed. So when heroes are very fast, I was able to keep up with them. I think that's the intended change here. Relocate cooldown increased from 120, 180 to 130, 110, 90. Slight nerf there. Tether no longer has a duration. Wow. Okay. Tether movement speed rescaled from 10, 12, 14, 16 to 7, 10, 13, 16. Tether regen sharing rescaled from 0.5 to 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5. Base damage reduced by 4. Okay, I think this makes Wisp super good. I think he was already a relatively powerful hero, just not utilized by too many teams. Again, Liquid, I think, was one of the few teams that would run him on occasion. And now I think Tether just having no cooldown means you're able to just naturally the allied hero that you're tethering is going to have sustainability just innately through you. So that's really nice. How big of a change is this now that I think about it? I think it's a nice quality of life change, because having to constantly cast Tether was a bit annoying. But especially with the fact that you're maintaining movement speed, I think you can do some pretty crazy things with Wisp now. So yeah, pretty good change overall. Kind of hard to say how impactful that is, but definitely nice. And I think it feels a bit more of like a quality of life change for the most part as well. You are tweaking some of the numbers here with Tether, so you're going to have to level that ability up as opposed to leaving it at level 1. So I guess you have that. So Leschrac base movement speed increased from 325 to 330. Dude is a speeding rocket. Leschrac lightning storm damage rescaled from 50, 100, 150, 200 to 80, 120, 160, 200. Leschrac lightning storm slow duration rescaled from 0.7 going all the way to 1 second to 0.4 going all the way to 1 second. Leschrac lightning storm spell cast point reduced from 0.45 to 0.4. Okay, so this makes Lightning Storm a little bit better as a potential level 1 skill. Now you can actually use Lightning Storm to harass your opponent and secure last hits. So that's a very important thing with Leschrac, is that before you just go split earth, then you'd get like Edict, split earth, In some cases, like Lightning Storm wasn't even leveled. Now you have a pretty good value point at level 1, and you can leave it at level 1. You don't necessarily have to invest more points into it, although its slow is extremely bad. I think you can just use it as kind of a laning thing because Leschrac's base damage is not particularly great. So let's just look up Leschrac very quickly here. So if we look at level 1 and go to, where's his damage at? Am I blind? So base level 1, attacks per second. So damage, he has 41 to 45. Whoops, I gotta see a message on Steam. Let me just mute my sound here. Okay, so he has 41 to 45, so he has 43 base damage. You'll probably end up picking up something like a Null Talisman, so you'll be sitting around low 50s. Whereas now you can rely a little bit more on the Lightning Storm. The mana cost of Lightning Storm at level 1 is extremely cheap as well. It's only 75. Yeah, it's going to be a little bit Zeus-esque in how you spam out Arc Lightnings and how you're going to be able to do damage, harass your opponent, things like that. So pretty nice change to the hero. I think this will make him a little bit more viable. So yeah, we might see Leschrac being picked up a little bit more. So Lich Sacrifice mana conversion increased from 30, 50, 70, 90 to 55, 70, 85, 100. So yeah, this is a slight buff to the hero. I think, again, Lich is not great in this hyper-aggressive meta. He doesn't offer too much in terms of team fights. Ice Armor is nice, but it doesn't help you enough, I think, in the early game. So yeah, that's why Lich is not particularly great. Now, with the fact that Chen can no longer send creeps back, I guess that's Lich has an innate ability that kind of does that with Sacrifice, but again, he doesn't create the same pressure as a hero like Chen. So I don't think we'll be seeing all too much of Lich. Lifestealer Open Wounds mana cost increased from 140, 130, 120, 110 to 140 at all levels. So it's just going to hurt him a little bit more in the late stages when you do eventually max out Open Wounds. It's still going to cost a decent chunk of mana. I think Lifestealer is in a relatively decent place. This was a good nerf to the hero so that he's not able to have enough mana all the time. He typically does pick up things like Wand and has some kind of sustainability. So he's not going to have too much trouble. I think he'll be okay with that, but this is a slight nerf to the hero. Lion Earth Spike mana cost rescaled from 100, 120, 140, 160 to 70, 100, 130, 160. So Earth Spike has a much lower mana cost now at level 1 and level 2. It catches up a little bit more as you eventually go on leveling it. So you're going to be able to spam this ability out in the early game. And it might also mean that you don't have to invest into mana drain so early, although mana drain is useful because it also takes something away from your opponent, right? Not so much about just the sustainability for Lion's mana pool. But now you can potentially go for Earth Spike and Hex at level 2 and have a lot more threat killing your opponent. Whereas before you'd probably go Earth Spike and like mana drain in most cases, I think. So lowering the cost on Earth Spike, definitely nice. So yeah, I'm not too sure if this is going to bring Lion into the meta per se, because he is okay at fighting early. The issue with Lion is that his spells don't have the greatest cast range, and oftentimes you put yourself in precarious positions just trying to cast your abilities. But yeah, this is going to allow Lion to be a bit more of a nuisance during the laning phase. So yeah, now imagine if you cast 3 Earth Spikes, that's 210 mana. You cast 3 Earth Spikes in the old version, that was 300 mana, so almost saving an entire cast of Earth Spike there. So Magnus Skewer AoE increased from 125 to 135. Reverse Polarity Stun duration increased from 2.25 to 3.25 so yeah, it looks like it went up. No, it did. Okay, so it goes up by 0.5 there, goes up by 0.25, and then back at the normal level. So it's a little bit better at the initial levels. So I think Magnus is one of those heroes that's a little too utility focused and doesn't apply enough pressure to the enemy safe lane. Again, the 3 most powerful offlaners are Tiny, Omni Knight, Tidehunter. And all 3 of those heroes not only farm extremely well in the off lane, they also create so much pressure to the enemy carry that they force the enemy supports to stick around for more or longer than they'd like to. Now, Magnus doesn't really do that as well as some of the other, the 3 heroes that I just mentioned. The thing that Magnus does do well is that he's able to transition into the jungle early on. At the same time, he's very good at messing up the enemy equilibrium because of how Shockwave works. You can Shockwave the creep wave and you can push it into the enemy tower, block your own creeps so that eventually the creeps will kind of come closer to your lane and slowly work your way to getting some golden EXP utilizing a technique like that. So the thing with Magnus is, again, I think he's a little bit too utility focused. He relies extremely on the reverse polarity cooldown. And apart from that, he's kind of an empower bot for your team. So he definitely has a place in certain lineups, but he's not quite tier 1 as an offlaner. So Mirana base attack damage range from 39 to 50 to 43 to 48. So just making it a little bit more consistent in how you deal damage. Again, I think Mirana is one of those heroes that has this, she has an extremely weird power spike. She does, when you first start out the game, she's not particularly powerful. Like Arrow is a very strong, like I'm talking about carry Miranas because roaming Mirana is not very common. The few times we do see Mirana, it's typically played in a core position. So core Mirana at level like 1, 2, 3, not very good. When she starts getting a little bit more points into Starfall, like when she hits level 5, she becomes very powerful. When she gets level 7 Starfall, she becomes extremely powerful. So she ramps up to a hero that's very powerful, and she maintains that power for a decent chunk of time. So I'd say for the first like 1 to 5 minutes, she's not great. And then from about 5 to about like 15, she's very strong. As you start maxing out Starfall, maxing out Sacred Arrow, she becomes extremely powerful. When you finally max out Leap, again, around like the 20-minute mark, she maintains that powerful kind of sense to the hero. When your opponents become a little bit more durable, she starts losing that power. So from like minute 20 to maybe like minute 30, assuming you're not snowballing out of control, she starts to slowly dwindle in power. And then she just shoots up again. She just becomes extremely powerful again because a lot of her talents are really nice. You can also farm up for some really key items. And that's really how she just becomes a lot more powerful, is through her talents and a lot of the items that she builds. So again, you can see here she gets 20 damage at level 1, which is really nice. She gets attack speed. You can get mana break, and then you can go for Moonlight cooldown if you really want to be a little bit more sneaky with your team. Or you can go for multi-shot. A lot of her talents are very powerful. Just across the board, they're extremely good. So that's one of the ways that she stays relevant throughout the match. But the main issue, again, is that she's very weak in the early onset, and you don't want a hero that's weak in the early game. At least in the current meta. So Monkey King, Wukong's command soldier attack rate improved from 1.4 to 1.3. Monkey King is okay. We do see him being picked up from time to time. He's very popular in pubs, actually, as a carry hero. It's kind of strange that these professional players don't necessarily always transition their pub play into competitive play. But as a core, we do see Monkey King from time to time. Again, he's like the Ursa and the Clinks, where he farms a little bit, then he starts moving around the map, and he starts creating a lot of pressure with very little items. Even with just like Ring of Aquila, maybe like Orb of Venom and Phase Boots, he's able to create so much pressure. The cool thing with Monkey King is that if you have Divine Rapiers, they actually work with Wukong's command illusions, or statues, whatever they're called. So yeah, I'm surprised we don't see more Divine Rapier Monkey Kings getting that massive AoE and just dumpstering everything in the area. But yeah, I think Monkey King overall is he's like a tier 2 carry hero at the moment. He's not too bad, he's okay. Necropho's Heartstopper aura increased from 1.52 to, so just a little bit better in the later levels. You typically don't level Heartstopper aura too much. You might put 1 or 2 value points into it. So yeah, I don't think that's gonna help him all too much. He has decent talents, but again, he needs a lot of points into each of his abilities to be very, very good. And on top of that, he needs a decent amount of farm to do well. So that's probably why we don't see Necrophos all too much. Not too sure why they didn't. Well, there's a space here. But anyways, Necrophos Death Pulse mana cost rescaled from 125, going all the way to 185 to 100 to 190. So a little bit better at the early levels. Again, the damage on Death Pulse is not great. He's not able to... Typically, when you play Necrophos, he's like a safe lane carry. So as a safe lane carry, he's not able to pressure the offlaner that much. He doesn't have very high kill potential. As a mid laner, he's not able to push out waves very quickly. And the thing is, he needs a lot of levels to start kicking into gear. So again, not a hero that's great for the meta. Ogre Magi, multicast no longer, increases Fire Blast mana cost, so it just makes it a little bit easier to play the hero. I think Ogre is, the thing with Ogre is he's very annoying when you play him as a position 4, you run around and cast Ignite and stuff, but he doesn't have high kill potential, not to the degree of some of the best roamers, right? Not to the degree of Earth Spirit or Tusk or Bounty Hunter, but he's just very annoying to play up against. So a slight buff there makes him a bit more playable without having to constantly spam clarities and things like that. Omni Knight Repel mana cost increased from 50 to 85. I think Omni is still way too powerful. Soul Ring is like one of the best items for him. Naturally gives him a boatload of mana, so he's not going to have too much trouble there. Still going to be a very, very powerful hero, but a nice nerf, or a decent nerf to start the nerf train. I'm assuming he's going to be nerfed a bit more throughout the patches that we have. Phantom Assassin, Stifling Dagger. So we got to the P heroes and I don't see Pangolier here. Okay, so that's the first thing. So let's talk about Pangolier. So Pangolier, I'll start off by saying this again. I think what they did with Dark Willow was good. Okay, in hindsight, like the fact that they didn't tweak her numbers, they let her go into the competitive scene just to see how the hero works. Because they can always tweak the numbers very quickly, right? Dota's a game where you can just patch like the day of or the day after if you see something get out of hand. So I think it's good that they didn't nerf Dark Willow too much, even this patch, and they didn't nerf her in the previous patch. So with Pangolier, I'll say this: he's a very powerful hero, but I'm happy that they didn't actually nerf him so that we can see how powerful he is in competitive play and extensive competitive play. And if he does turn out to be too powerful, again, they can roll out a patch within a day or two to nerf some of his numbers or tweak some of his numbers. The thing with Pangolier is that he's able to secure farm from a far distance as an offlaner. He has the sheer amount of utility that this hero has is insane. He can, so let's bring up some of his stuff here and talk about why Pangolier is as powerful as he is. So first off, Swashbuckle, the cooldown is relatively high at 20 seconds, but it's not like super high where you can't play around it. Typically you can use it twice within a creep wave if you aim it properly. And the thing with Swashbuckle is you can harass with it and get last hits at the same time. It does a decent amount of damage at level 1, almost 100 damage to your opponent, doing about 96 there. And so it's good for last hitting, good for escaping. And then the thing with Swashbuckle is that when you pair it up with Heart Piercer, it actually, in the later stages of the game, removes all of your opponent's armor. Okay, it just sets it to 0. Okay, so the armor negation sets the armor to 0. This means that it also negates armor reducing effects, right? So minus armor strats aren't going to work particularly well with Pangolier, but bringing an opponent's armor to 0 is huge, especially when you're playing up against these very tanky agility heroes in the later stages of the game, like Terrorblade and Juggernaut, Luna. These heroes just naturally have so much armor. This just takes away all of that. All right, so yeah, it's a very powerful ability with Swashbuckle. On top of that, he has Shield Crash, which is an ability that makes him so tanky in teamfights. If you're able to hit like 2 or 3 heroes with Shield Crash and you get the talent that reduces it to a 2-second cooldown, he just goes to town. He's just in the middle of a team fight, soaking up so much damage, dishing out a decent amount of damage to the point where you actually have to focus him. And when you have Rolling Thunder, which again, they did nerf the cooldown on this a little bit, but I think it's still too low, 70 seconds going all the way down to 1 minute at max level. It's too low. I think maybe having this at like 90, 80, 70 would get to a point where you're not able to use it to such a degree, because now you can use Rolling Thunder in like the Roshan pit. You can get Roshan, then you can wait 1 minute, go push a tower. You can use it to push one tower, wait a minute, push another tower. So that's a little too powerful, I think, right now, especially with the rest of the hero's toolkit. There's some pretty cool techniques that you can do. You can, Shield Crash, and while you're in midair, you Swashbuckle, and you'll actually jump out of Shield Crash, but maintain the effect of it and the damage and all that stuff to the new targeted Swashbuckle area. So he's got some pretty cool tricks that you can do. Very powerful hero, and I'm very excited to see how competitive teams deal with him, considering that DAC is actually going on as of right now, as of this patch being dropped. It's going to be pretty interesting. So Phantom Assassin is the next hero we have. Phantom Assassin Stifling Dagger can be targeted on spell immune. The slow won't have any effect, but the physical damage will go through. So that's a pretty nice change to Phantom Assassin, actually. Before, you can just use BKB and she wouldn't actually be able to even jump onto you. So let's go to Phantom Assassin very quickly. So yeah, you can't Phantom Strike. Oh, they made it so that it does pierce? So before you used to be able to, I didn't know that that change actually happened. So before you couldn't actually Phantom Strike onto a magic immune target. So that must have been a change that happened relatively recently, or a couple patches ago. So that's actually nice. So now you can actually Phantom Strike and you can actually use a Stifling Dagger onto magic immune heroes. So magic immunity is not going to help you against PA. I think she is a decent hero. She's a hero that relies on having a pretty good start. You can go for, there's kind of two builds with Phantom Assassin. You either go for the Desolator into a little bit more lifesteal and damage oriented stuff, or you can go for the Battle Fury and start working towards bigger items. And both of them tend to work out okay for Phantom Assassin. I think the Battle Fury route is probably a little bit more safer, because if you do go for Desolator and then your opponent has something like a Solar Crest, or they just have like Force Staff and things like that to save their teammates, you start falling off very quickly if you don't secure kills. Whereas Battle Fury does give you a decent amount of damage as well. It's not like it doesn't give you any damage, but it gives you damage as well as all this farming opportunity to help you accelerate in case you aren't able to secure kills. The only issue is when you go Desolator, you have a very easy time of securing Roshan. And Desolator also makes it so that you're a legitimate threat at taking towers very early in the game because of the corruption. And the minus armor you can put on towers. So PA is in an okay spot. Again, she works well with Magnus when you have Empower, but she also works extremely well with a hero like Omni Knight, who can just cast Repel on her and she can go to town. So you probably want the Omni Knight over the Magnus. Still, she's okay in certain situations. Phoenix Supernova radius increased from 1000 to 1300. Phoenix Supernova now turns night into day for the duration, so it has the highest priority. So highest priority might mean, I think, like it goes above Night Stalkers, it goes above Luna's, Eclipse, I'm assuming. So highest priority, I'm just assuming it always turns daytime when Phoenix uses ulti. So that's a pretty cool change. Probably not going to have a massive impact. Like, sure, you're going to have Keeper of the Light in certain games. It's going to make Night Stalker a bit worse if he has like Ags or something. So just, I think, a cool effect. It's definitely going to have an effect in some matches, don't get me wrong, but in most cases I think it's just going to be a pretty cool effect. The radius increase is actually huge. It already had a massive AoE. Now it's like it's even bigger. You could legitimately channel this thing like almost a screen away from your opponent. So that's crazy. So yeah, a little buff there. I think the hero is innately pretty weak. OG was the only team that was running him. I think Fly would pick it up from time to time. But yeah, we haven't really seen Phoenix all too much. I think it's partly because very low armor. Phoenix has pretty good abilities, like value abilities, I should say. You don't need to invest too many points into a lot of Phoenix's skills to get a lot of utility from Phoenix. But yeah, I think in terms of having like lockdown and things of that nature, Phoenix is not great. So yeah, that's probably one of the main issues with the hero, is not enough crowd control. Pretty good at zoning out offlaners and things like that, but high cooldowns and not particularly high in the CC department. So Razor Static Link, range reduced from 600 to 550, break range is still 800, so once you cast the skill, the range is, it still takes quite a bit of effort for your opponent to get away from you. Razor's unstable current damage reduced from 100, 130, 160, 190 to 60, 100, 140, 180. So you're gonna have to invest a lot more points into into unstable current if you want to dish out damage to your opponent. So this probably just means that you're gonna you might just not max. The thing with Plasma Field, it's way too good. I think this is just a nerf. I think you have to max Static Link and Plasma Field, and then of course, when you go Static Link, you typically leave it at like level 2, and then you max unstable, or you get 2 points in like unstable current, and then you go back to Plasma Field or unstable. Oh my god, I'm stumbling on this. So basically, you go like Static Link, Plasma Field, Static Link, Plasma Field, and then you get a couple points in unstable current, and then you go back to Static Link and Plasma Field. So now it becomes a decision between maxing out one of your abilities or having unstable current. I don't think the damage is all too noteworthy. You still probably max Static Link and Plasma Field over unstable current though. So this is just kind of like a nerf to the hero. But overall, I think he's still fine. Razor is still a fine hero. Riki, Tricks of the Trade reworked. Instead of hitting every hero in the AoE once per second, it hits a random hero once per 0.5, 0.45, 0.4 seconds. So this makes Riki more of a true assassin. You're able to deal so much damage to an opponent very quickly. But in team fights, he's not as good, which is fine. Tricks of the Trade will hit creeps if there are no heroes available. Tricks of the Trade duration increased from 3, 4, 5 to 4, 5, 6. So again, I think this is a little bit more of a focus on straight up murdering someone rather than a team fight. So this might make like position 3 Riki a little bit more viable, because as a carry, I think the older having the AoE hit everyone once was much nicer. But now you have one specific target that you can do a lot of damage to. So having like a position 3 Riki is okay, but then you have a position 3 Riki. That's the problem. So as a carry, I think this is worse. As a position 3, it's good if you can get away with it. Definitely like nicer in pubs, I think, because you probably wouldn't get a full channel like duration hitting everyone anyway. This just makes it very easy for you to straight up kill someone early on. Again, it's also nice because you don't have to get a diffusal super early. You're getting much more hits off onto a hero per like second, I should say. So it's okay. Definitely better in certain situations, worse in some. Rubik overall, Riki's still bad though, so probably not going to be seeing him being picked up. Rubik Telekinesis cooldown increased from 22 to 28, 26, 24, 22. So a slight nerf to Rubik. Still a fantastic hero. I think the thing was Rubik was already a good hero, and then they made it so that you can actually toggle his null field into an offensive aura, which has put the hero overboard. So he's a little too powerful at the moment. Sand King Burrow Strike stun duration rescaled from 2.17 to 1.9, 2.0, 2.1, 2.2. Sand King base movement speed. So a slight nerf to Sand King makes his stun a little bit worse, and he's a little bit slower, which is fine. I think these are just decent nerfs to Sand King. I don't think it's going to impact him all too much. He's still probably going to be seeing the same pick and ban rate. Of course, if you get further nerfs compounded onto Sand King over the next few weeks, then he becomes a little bit worse because of the change here. So Shadow Demon, Demonic Purge, slow now, always scales linearly with time from 100% to 20%. Shadow Demon, Demonic Purge cooldown increased from 40 to 60. FX charges replenished, so the cooldown is increased now. Demonic Purge duration is also increased from 5 to 7. Demonic Purge no longer roots non-hero units for 3 seconds. Demonic Purge now continuously dispels the target. Wow. Okay, so that's pretty good. That was a Owen Wilson wow there. Wow. So this is actually a pretty massive change. There aren't a lot of things that dispel in Dota currently. So if we look at dispel here, there just aren't too many things. So you have a lot of like dispels that come from ability, like Chaos Knights is just dispelling himself. But when you look at offensive spells that would dispel, let's just go through the list. So you have like Enchant that targets an enemy. Invoker's Tornado, Lifesteal does it for himself. These are for themselves. Fortune's End, that's 3. You have Razor's Current, Demonic Purge, Sven's with his buff. So not too much you can see that. Most of the other ones just come from items, right? Like Yule's Nullifier, you can use these on your opponents to dispel them. So not too many things, like a handful. We can say like somewhere between like 6 to 8 realistic things that can dispel. So when you have an ability that's as powerful as Purge that can continuously dispel an opponent, this means that when certain buffs get put on your opponent, so for example, like a Glimmer Cape can get dispelled now. What else? Like just a whole bunch of like you cast Purge early on like Windrunner, she can't Windrun. Sven's Warcry. You can, like the thing is you don't have to wait for your opponents to use their abilities. That's a huge component of this spell right now, is that before you have to wait for the Windrunner, you have to wait for the Warcry. You'd have to wait for some kind of buff to come out. Now you just cast it and it's just constantly dispelling your opponents. That's a pretty cool change to the hero. Is it enough to bring him into the meta? I'm not too sure, but it's definitely a step in the right direction, giving him an ability as powerful as this. So Slark base HP regen increased from 1.5 to 2.75. Turn rate improved from 0.5 to 0.6. This is actually pretty big. So base HP regen being high is one of the reasons a lot of these heroes are very powerful. So let's open the base regen chart. Dota 2 base HP regen. Is it in health? Health bars? No. And let me just talk about it. So the thing with HP regen is that it makes a lot of heroes that otherwise would not be able to lane particularly well. It allows them to lane extremely well. So if we look at this chart here, you'll notice that some of the carry heroes have very high HP regen. So Terrorblade has 3, Phantom Lancer has 3, Monkey King 3, and you can notice that these heroes are very popular because they have built-in HP regen. So now you give Slark, oh, it's at 2.75 he's at now? So he's sitting right under Terrorblade. So the thing with Slark is before he get pressured, you'd have to send a lot of restoratives and you would have to wait until you're level 6 to get that HP regen kicking in, except now you have that kind of innately built in. So it's a little bit better for Slark, and it's going to make him a bit more powerful than he otherwise was. And the thing is, Slark is fantastic in the mid game. The thing with Slark is he's kind of weird in terms of power spikes. Again, he's a hero that needs to have a decent amount of kill participation early in the game. You can potentially go for Battle Fury with Slark. That's something that was kind of popularized in the Chinese scene a few months ago. Yeah, you can farm up a storm with Slark that way and transition into a carry later on. And the thing with Slark is he's kind of weird because, again, he's very powerful in the mid game when you have your items up and running, like around the 20-25 minute mark, and then he becomes relatively poor again because you're not able to kill enemies very quickly and it takes you a very long time to dish out damage. So around the late 30 to early 40, he's kind of weak, and as the game transitions on into like this hyper late game scenario, he's strangely becomes very powerful again because you become very tanky, it becomes very hard to kill Slark, and you're building up so many stacks with Essence Shift. So Slark has these very weird power spikes in the game. So I think overall this might be enough to bring Slark back into competitive. He's definitely a very powerful hero under the right situation, so we might be seeing him from time to time. Slardar Guardian Sprint no longer has a 15% damage amplification. Guardian Sprint duration reduced from 12 to 10. So slight buff to the hero here. I think the sprint duration being from 12 to 10 isn't too much of a nerf, whereas I think the 15% damage amp is a really nice buff. It lets you dive towers a lot more safely and create pressure just, trading right clicks with an enemy offlaner or something like that. At the same time, if you're an offlaner and there'd be those times where you pop your Guardian Sprint trying to get away, only to take even more damage. So that component is gone now. Sniper Assassinate mana cost reduced from 175 to 75, 375 to 175, 225, 275. So pretty low mana cost at max level, 100 to be exact. Sniper was already a pretty decent hero, so it's just a pretty decent quality of life change early on. Later on in the game. You weren't typically ever mana starved with Sniper to begin with. I think it's just like now you can just kind of shoot this a little bit more often just to get a little bit of extra harass onto your opponent. So that's a pretty nice change. Spectral Dagger damage increased from 50, 100, 150, 200 to 90. So just 40 at all levels. The thing with Spectre is she's okay. She's not great in the early game. She's okay. She can contribute decently to her team with Haunt throughout the game. And as the game progresses into some of the into the later stages, that's when Spectre kind of kicks into gear. But she's no longer this super hyper carry that guarantees you the win in the late game. There's just a lot of other heroes that are just very powerful at the same time as Spectre, like in the current patch. So Spectre's kind of fallen out of favor. Again, I don't think like a lot of the items that she built, like Vanguard is one of the items that she used to build into very, very commonly, and Vanguard kind of sucks. Sometimes you'll see like a Spirit Vessel build coming out from Spectre, which is not great. Like I see it in pubs. I see people going for Spirit Vessel on Spectre, but then you end up selling it because you become like slot starved way too quickly. So not too much of a fan of Spectre, and I don't think this changes enough to bring her back. Spirit Breaker Empowering Haste active no longer reduces your movement speed afterwards. Empowering Haste cooldown increased from 12 to 20. So Spirit Breaker has, much like Darkseer, fallen off the face of the earth. And I'm not too sure why, actually, because I think he's still a decent position 4 hero that can create a lot of pressure around the map. I think one of the major issues is that he doesn't quite have the utility of the 3 big ones, right? He doesn't have Earth Spirit, Earth Spirit, Tusk, and Bounty. These heroes offer an extreme amount of utility that I think Spirit Breaker is just like 1 tier under. Tusk can create a lot of pressure with shards. He offers an insane amount of utility with Snowball. Earth Spirit is just a utility machine. Bounty Hunter offers you vision and like kill potential at the same time and a huge influx of gold under the right situations. Whereas Spirit Breaker is mostly just gank potential, and he does offer a little bit of vision over targets, so he does have that going for him. The other thing I think is that Spirit Breaker doesn't work extremely well with items, and it's very hard to get items on the hero. He has next to no AoE. Sure, you can charge, like neutrals and hit like a bunch of them. But he doesn't farm particularly fast. He has to kind of throw his body on the line to get kills. He does have fantastic base stats, so he's not too worried about that. But as the game transitions on later and later, I think he becomes weaker and weaker. So that's one of the main issues with him. And people are constantly fighting in the current meta, and he's not great at dealing with like constant fight situations. He likes to go for pickoffs. And I think that's one of the main reasons he's not picked too much, because other than that, he has very good stats. He has very good killing potential in the early game. It's just that he's not good when people start grouping up together. So Templar Assassin movement speed increased from 300 to 310. So this is a pretty nice TA. I think just a pretty nice, decent quality of life change. She's already, I think, a decent hero. Very, very powerful in the right situations. And in general, she's just good. So having a slight movement speed buff is nice. Timbersaw Chakram mana cost per second reduced from 20, 25, 30 to 16, 23, 30. Timbersaw Chakram initial mana cost reduced from 100, 150, 200 to 80, 140, 200. So some quality of life changes to Timbersaw. Again, a hero that we saw Liquid play. What tournament was it at? Dream League, I think. Liquid playing Croaky playing that Timbersaw at Dream League a couple days ago, definitely showing how strong that hero is under certain situations. We don't see him being picked up all too much because, again, I do think that he needs a decent amount of items to get online. But if he gets the thing is, this hero has the potential to outright stomp certain matchups if you get a good lane situation for him. So definitely powerful in certain scenarios, relatively weak in most lineups if you aren't able to get that snowbally start. Tiny base health regen reduced from 2.5 to 1.5, so he's gone back down to normal. Tiny avalanche cooldown increased from 17 to 20, 19, 18, 17. So pretty nice change to Tiny. Makes it so that if you're playing offlane Tiny, you have to buy a little bit more restoratives because you don't have that boosted influx of HP regen. So now it's a little bit longer in terms of how long it's going to take you to heal up your HP just by idling and things like that. And Avalanche having a little bit longer cooldown means that you're not able to go for as many aggressive plays as often. But that's nerfs a bit. I don't think the Avalanche cooldown is as noteworthy as the heal regen. So yeah, this is going to make, I think, the offlane Tiny a little bit worse. He's still very powerful, don't get me wrong. Tree grab is kind of the bread and butter of Tiny. So as long as that doesn't get tweaked all too much, I think he's going to be fine. Treant Protector base increased by 3. The main issue with Treant, again, not great at dealing with hyper-aggression. Kind of like Dazzle, where once you get a point into all of your abilities, Treant becomes very powerful. But the value points on this hero are not great. Troll Warlord Berserker's Rage base attack time improved from 1.5 to 1.45. We've been seeing Troll getting picked up a little bit more often in competitive play. He's a hero who's able to sustain himself in a 1v1 situation particularly well. And he does okay against dual lanes as long as he has another partner that is decent as well. Like if it's like a Witch Doctor Troll against, I don't know, like Abaddon +1, he's okay because of just how whirling axes work, and he's able to harass his opponents and blind them. He also has a ranged form, which means he can trade farm relatively okay under pressure. So Troll is okay, slight buff to the hero. Tusk Ice Shard's cooldown increased from 19, 16, 30, 10 to 21, so just two higher at each level. Decent nerf. It still needs a little bit more tweaks. I think making Tusk a little bit slower as a hero would be nice. That'd probably be the first step, is reducing his movement speed by a little bit. Because as of right now, he's able to trap opponents for a long time. He's able to catch up to opponents because of Snowball. And if you're able to hinder his initial movement speed, it kind of reduces some of those utility spells that he has inadvertently. So I think hitting the movement speed would probably be the right way to go with Tusk. Undying Zombie, critical health attack speed boost increased from 50 to 75. Is that the percentage? So let's go to Undying very quickly. I think they're talking about the percentage. Where are the zombies at? Zombie. So yeah, before it was 50%. For your opponent. So now I'm assuming at 75, which is a massive buff, by the way. So yeah, they're going to get triggered a lot faster. So that's insane, actually. That might be too strong. We'll see. Undying Flesh Golem hero heal increase from 10% to 15, 20, 25. So that's wow, that's actually insane. So this makes Undying a little bit more powerful in the late game, especially with the Flesh Golem, and then the zombie critical health going from 50 to 75. Holy, that's really good. Like even if you just have one AoE that hits like every opponent and brings them relatively low in the early game, like if you have like a Zeus Thunder God's Wrath, holy, those zombies are gonna go crazy. So yeah, just probably gonna be a little bit better in the early game. He was already good in the early game, so this buffs him a little bit more in the early game, and then as the game transitions on, he still stays relatively powerful, I think. So might be seeing Undying picked a little bit more often here. It might become like a tier 2, semi-tier 1 support with this buff. Warlock Golem's attack damage increased, or maybe even offlane, going back to Undying. He might be more of a stable offlane hero because he can solo pressure with just Decay and Tombstone. So gonna be pretty interesting to see how Undying is played. Warlock Golem's attack damage increased from 75, 125 to 25 higher at second level and 50 higher at the next level. Okay, so again, the issue with Warlock is he's a hero that doesn't have good value points. Level 1 in each of his abilities aren't particularly good. He needs to max out most of them, or at least get 2 to 3 in most of them, and that's not something that you can really ask for as a support. If you don't have value skills early on in the game, it's going to be pretty bad. So that's a major problem with Warlock, is as a support, he doesn't have too many value skills. He requires a lot of levels to get really up and running, and he doesn't have, like, sure, he has some heal and slows and things like that, but if you just if people are running at your cores, Warlock doesn't do all too much. Windranger, fix some clunkiness with how Windranger attacks the target during focus fire, so quality of life stuff. Speaking of Windranger, I think she's a okay hero to be played as a core under certain situations. One of the main issues is that she does require, I think, an Aghanim Scepter to function well, because otherwise she doesn't have enough damage. I've seen a lot of players discuss this issue with Windrunner, and they're trying to, when they initially had the change for focus fire, they were testing out certain things like having Javelin built on her. They were going for early like crit, just so you can focus a little bit more on the auto attack. Like they were going for Daedalus and things like that, or a very early Bloodthorn. But I think you still have to play around her Aghanim Scepter because of how you can transition from objective to objective so quickly. You can like hit a tower a couple times, you can go back, you can just focus fire again 15 seconds later, you can go for like Roshan, you can do tower chip damage, you can go for hero kills, and Ags just allows her to do that very easily, so I don't think you can skip Ags. The issue with Ags is it's not a great item for the hero. Like it's buffing her ultimate, sure, but you need to have a whole bunch of other items first. Like if you go Ags first on Windrunner, it's not going to do anything. Like you have too low damage, so maybe you need like a casual crit, and then you go for Ags, or you have like a Deso, go for Ags, you have Maelstrom, go for Ags, something like that. I think is how you have to play the hero. But yeah, she's like a bit gimmicky. I think there are heroes that are a little bit more reliable than Windrunner. That's one of the main issues. Winter Wyvern, Arctic Burn attack range changed from 275 to 575 max level to 350 and 575. So a little bit better at the early stages, and then base increased by 1. So Smart Dragon, or Wyvern, I should say. So smart Wyvern. So yeah, just a little bit more attack range at level 1. Again, I think one of the main issues with Winter Wyvern is these defensive supports are not good, as you can notice. Warlock is a little bit more defensive in nature. Dazzle's defensive. You would say Winter Wyvern she has potential to do both, but I think for the most part, you would say that she's a little bit more defensive, at least in the early portion of the game, and then she starts to ramp up a little bit more and can contribute offensively. But when you're only able to save like one hero, or you need a lot of points invested into your skills, those supports are not gonna function well. And Winter Wyvern she's okay at skirmishing constantly, but Splinter Blast has a very high mana cost, so that's one of the main issues with the hero as well. Zeus attack range increased from 350 to 380, and base damage increased by a little bit, so you no longer have to rely on spamming Arc Lightning. You can actually try to get a couple right clicks in, which is nice because then you just feed your opponent wand charges throughout the lane. So pretty nice change to Zeus, I think. He was seeing occasional play. I think it was like Sumail on EG was running it from time to time a few months ago. But apart from that, I don't think we've really seen Zeus being picked all too much. Very easy to gank the hero. That's one of the main issues with him going mid. Not particularly fast, but during mid game, he has some of the highest damage output. And I think he synergizes very well with some of the heroes that have been buffed throughout this patch. So Bloodseeker works extremely well with Zeus in terms of getting that damage put out there. Again, the issue with running Zeus Bloodseeker is you don't really have a tower hitter at that point, between those two cores at least. Or it's just like a safe, reliable tower hitter. Again, Bloodseeker, okay at hitting towers, maybe not particularly safe though. And then you have Zeus Undying, which is another one that we just mentioned a little bit earlier, where the new threshold is at like 75%. So if you just Thunder God's Wrath and like Arc Lightning and cast a Lightning Bolt or something, your zombies are gonna probably go a little crazy. so pretty nice changes throughout this patch, I think. So some of the takeaways, we saw the supports getting buffed very early on. That's one of the things that kind of stuck into my mind. Again, I'd like this number to move up to maybe like 25. We see a slew of buffs and nerfs to some of the items. I think for the most part, this is to try to end the game a little bit earlier. Most of these changes, Nullifier just getting changed a little bit because it's too powerful. In terms of noteworthy hero changes, I think Bloodseeker, again, got to give a shout out to my boy. Probably one of my favorite changes, buffing him up a little bit. Darkseer has a bunch of weird changes to Vacuum, like nerfs and buffs. I think we'll have to wait and see how that really impacts the hero. Enchantress, again, losing a lot of her utility. I should say value is a better way to put it. Losing a lot of those like value points. You're going to have to invest a little bit more into some of her abilities. A bit more combat focused. Gyro getting a pretty sizable nerf to Flat Cannon there. I'm going to make it so that you don't just use Flat Cannon willy-nilly. You're going to have to time it, I think, a little bit better. Leschrac, pretty good change here. Makes it so that you can farm with Lightning Storm early in the game and makes him, I think, a bit more as a viable mid-hero. So I think those were like the really big changes. And then Shadow Demon's Dispel is really nice, along with Slark's HP regen. Most of the other stuff was just like quality of life things, slaps on the wrist in terms of nerfs, nothing too overbearing. So yeah, pretty good change overall. We'll probably be seeing some of these changes actually impact the DAC tournament that's happening right now, as this patch dropped after the first day of DAC. So pretty nice changes. I'd like to see Pangolier being played in some of the matches today, so that we get pretty, I think we saw him being picked a little bit in like the captain's draft or whatever that DC was doing. But this is going to be where he's like in the main pool, right? So it's going to be pretty cool. So yeah, that's it for the video, guys. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope you guys enjoyed. And as always, GG until next time.